Let me ask Herman Cain first. Did you get the question?
I didn't quite get the question.
If the specific question is, if Israel attacked Iran to prevent Tehran from getting nuclear weapons, would you help Israel launch the attack or support it otherwise?
I would first make sure that they had a credible plan for success, clarity of mission and clarity of success. Remember, when you talk about attacking Iran, it is a very mountainous region. The latest reports say that there may be 40 different locations, and I would want to make sure that we had a good idea from intelligence sources where these are located, and if Israel had a credible plan that it appeared as if they could succeed, I would support Israel, yes. And in some instances, depending upon how strong the plan is, we would join with Israel for that if it was clear what the mission was and it was clear what the definition of victory was.
Congressman Paul, would you support Israel and help Israel in such an attack?
No, I wouldn't do that. But there'd be good reasons, because I don't expect it to happen, because, you know, the Mossad leader that just retired said it would be the stupidest thing to do in the world. And it's a big argument over in Israel. They're not about to do this. They've just polled 40 major experts on foreign policy here by the National Journal. Not one of them said there should be a unilateral attack on the sites in Iran. So that's not going to happen. And if it did, you're supposing that if it did, why does Israel need our help? We need to get out of their way. I mean, we interfere with them. We interfere with them when they deal with their borders, when they want to have peace treaties. We tell them what they can do because we buy their allegiance and they sacrifice their sovereignty to us. And then they decide they want to bomb something. That's their business, but they should, you know, suffer the consequences. When they bombed the Iraqi missile site, nuclear site back in the 80s, I was one of the few in Congress that said it's none of our business, and Israel should take care of themselves. Israel has 200, 300 nuclear missiles, and they can take care of themselves. Why should we commit? We don't even have a treaty with Israel. Why do we have this automatic commitment that we're going to send our kids and send our money endlessly to Israel? So I think they're quite capable of taking care of themselves. I think we do detriment. Just think of all the money we gave to Egypt over 30 or 40 years. Now look, we were buying friendship. Now there's a civil war. They're less friendly to Israel. That whole thing is going to backfire once we go bankrupt and we remove our troops. So I think we should be very cautious in our willingness to go to war and send troops without a proper declaration by the U.S. Congress.
Let me let Herman Cain respond.
Thank you. I stated, if the mission and the plan were clear, that it could succeed. But I pointed out that that is highly unlikely given the terrain, the mountainous terrain in Iran. But here's the other reason that we should help Israel in an initiative like that. Back to Afghanistan. If we pull out of Afghanistan too soon, Iran is going to help fulfill that power vacuum in Afghanistan. And so it is in our best interest, the United States of America, to prevent them from being able to help fill that power vacuum in Afghanistan.
Let's stay on this subject, and I want all of you to weigh in. We have another question. Please give us your name and your organization.
Good evening. I'm Danielle Pletka. I'm the Vice President for Foreign and Defense Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. Yesterday, the United States and the UK slapped new sanctions on Iran. But we haven't bought oil directly from Iran in over 30 years. We've had targeted sanctions on Iran for more than half that time. Nonetheless, Iran is probably less than a year away from getting a nuclear weapon. Do you believe that there is any set of sanctions that could be put in place that would stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon?
Let's go to Governor Perry. What do you think?
Absolutely. We need to sanction the Iranian central bank. That would be one of the most powerful ways to impact that. As a matter of fact, Congressman Paul, that is what we need to do before we ever start having any conversations about a military strike, is to use every sanction that we have. And when you sanction the Iranian central bank, that will shut down that economy. At that particular point in time, they truly have to deal with the United States. And it's one of the reasons that I call for there is an area over there of all of them working together, and I'm talking about Syria, and bringing them into the mix as well. As I call for, one of the options is to have a no-fly zone over Syria. At the same time, you're putting those types of sanctions against Iran, and in that moment, they will understand that America is serious. This president refuses to do that, and it's another show of lack of leadership from the President of the United States.
The argument, Speaker Gingrich, and I know you've studied this, and I want you to weigh in on the sanctioning of the Iranian central bank, is if you do that, for all practical purposes, it cuts off Iranian oil exports, 4 million barrels a day. The Europeans get a lot of that oil. They think their economy, if the price of gasoline skyrocketed, which it would be disastrous. That's why the pressure is on the U.S. not to impose those sanctions. What say you?
Well, I say the question you have to ask is perfect, because the fact is we ought to have a massive all-sources energy program in the United States designed to once again create a surplus of energy here, so we could say to the Europeans pretty cheerfully that all the various sources of oil we have in the United States, we could literally replace the Iranian oil. Now, that's how we won World War II. So I think you put your finger on you know, we all get sucked into these tactical discussions. We need a strategy of defeating and replacing the current Iranian regime with minimum use of force. We need a strategy, as Rick Santorum was saying, of being honest about radical Islam and designing a strategy to defeat it wherever it happens to exist. We need a strategy in Central Asia that recognizes that, frankly, if you're Pashtun, you don't care whether you're in Pakistan or Afghanistan because you have the same tribal relationships. So we need to be much more strategic and less tactical in our discussion. But if we were serious, we could break the Iranian regime, I think, within a year, starting, candidly, with cutting off the gasoline supply to Iran and then, frankly, sabotaging the only refinery they have.
But sanctions on the Iranian central bank now, is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I think it's a good idea if you're serious about stopping them having nuclear weapons. I think replacing the regime before they get a nuclear weapon without a war beats replacing the regime with a war, which beats allowing them to have a nuclear weapon. Those are your three choices.
I want Congressman Bachmann to weigh in. Go ahead.
I agree with all of that, and energy independence is something that President Obama certainly has avoided.
But that's going to take many years.
It will, but the president, almost every decision that the president has made since he came in has been one to put the United States in a position of unilateral disarmament, including the most recent decision he made to cancel the Keystone Pipeline. That would have not only created jobs, but it would have helped us in energy independence. But I want to go back to something. That's the fact. Why is it that we're talking about Israel having to make a strike against Iran? It's because Iran has announced they plan to strike Israel. They've stated as recently as August, just before President Ahmadinejad came to the UN General Assembly, he said that he wanted to eradicate Israel from the face of the earth. He has said that if he has a nuclear weapon, he will use it to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. He will use it against the United States of America. This isn't just an idle threat. This is a reality, and that's why President Obama has failed the American people, because for 2.5 years, he gave Iran the luxury of time. He met with them with no preconditions. It's the doctrine of appeasement. He has changed the course of history because at the time when we needed a leader most, we didn't have one. That's what I'll do differently as President of the United States. I'll lead.
All right, we're going to continue this, but we have another question from Paul Wolfowitz. Go ahead.
My name is Paul Wolfowitz. I'm a visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and my question is about development assistance. Under George W. Bush, who was a conservative Republican, the United States spent billions of dollars to fight AIDS and malaria in Africa and elsewhere, and set up the Millennium Challenge Corporation to encourage governments of poor countries to pursue policies that promote economic growth and job creation. Do you believe those are still wise expenditures, or do you think that we can no longer afford them?
Senator Santorum.
Was the author of the Global Fund Bill and the Millennium Challenge in the United States Senate, and someone who worked with the president on PEPFAR to deal with the issue of AIDS in Africa. I believe it's absolutely essential. Africa was a country on the brink of complete meltdown and chaos, which would have been fertile ground for the radical Islamists to be able to get a foothold. We're seeing it already, but the work that we've done in stabilizing that area, while humanitarian in nature, was absolutely essential for our national security. And I hear people up here talking about zeroing out foreign aid and humanitarian aid in particular. I think that's absolutely the wrong course. You want to spend more money on the military? Zero out all the things we do to develop relationships around the world, and we will spend a lot more money on the military. It's important for us to use all the assets we have, promote our values. America is that shining city on the hill. It is the city that comes to the aid of those in trouble in the world. We have done more good for America in Africa and in the third world by the things that we've done, and we have saved money and saved military deployments by wisely spending that money, not on our enemies, but on folks who can and will be our friends.
Herman Cain.
Here again.
And here's the question. Can the United States afford to continue that kind of foreign assistance to Africa for AIDS, malaria, could run into the billions of dollars?
It depends upon priorities. Secondly, it depends upon looking at the program and asking the question, has that aid been successful? In other words, let's look at the whole problem. It may be worthwhile to continue, it may not. I would like to see the results, just like every program we have here domestically. What have the results been? Then we make a decision about how we prioritize.
Ron Paul.
I think the aid is all worthless. It doesn't do any good for most of the people. You take money from poor people in this country and you end up giving it to rich people in poor countries. And they're used as weapons of war, so you accomplish nothing. We should export maybe some principles about free markets and sound money, and maybe they could produce some of their own wealth. But this whole idea of talking about the endless wars and the endless foreign aid, it seems like nobody cares about the budget. I mean, we're in big trouble, and nobody wants to cut anything. So if you're going to keep sending foreign aid overseas and these endless wars that you don't have to declare and go into Libya without even consulting with the Congress, the biggest threat to our national security is our financial condition. And this is just aggravating it.
Governor Romney.
Congressman Paul, what they're doing is cutting $1 trillion out of the defense budget. They're cutting $1 trillion out of the defense budget, which just happens to equal the $1 trillion they're putting into Obamacare. And so what you have is a president that has a priority of spending us into bankruptcy, but he's not just spending us into bankruptcy, he's spending the money foolishly. We need to protect America and protect our troops and our military and stop the idea of Obamacare. That's the best way to save money, not the military.
But hold on one second, because Ron Paul wants to respond to that point.
Well, they're not cutting anything out of anything. All this talk is just talk. Believe me. They're nibbling away at baseline budgeting. It's automatic increases. There's nothing cut against the military, and the people on the Hill are nearly hysterical because the budget isn't going up as rapidly as they wanted to. It's a road to disaster. We better wake up.
Oh, okay. Let's just talk about what they're cutting with the first $350 billion, not the next $600, which is coming down the road. The first $350 billion, what did they cut? They stopped the F-22. They delayed aircraft carriers. They stopped the Navy cruiser system. They said long-range Air Force bombers aren't going to be built. They're trying to cut our troops by 50,000. The list goes on. They're cutting programs, cutting the capacity of America to defend itself. Look, let's stand back for a moment, because we've been talking about Israel and Iran. What we're talking about here is a failure on the part of the president to lead with strength. And that's why we have discussions about whether Israel should have to step in to stop the nuclear program, whether Iran is going to become nuclear. We have a president who pursued an agenda of saying we're going to be friendly to our foes and we're going to be disrespectful to our friends. The right course in America is to stand up to Iran with crippling sanctions, indict Ahmadinejad for violating the Geneva or the Genocide Convention, put in place the kind of crippling sanctions that stop their economy. I know it's going to make gasoline more expensive. There's no price which is worth an Iranian nuclear weapon. And the right course for Israel is to show that we care about Israel, that they are our friend, we'll stick with them. If I'm president of the United States, my first foreign trip will be to Israel to show the world we care about that country and that region.
All right, we're going to stay on this subject. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Allison Acosta Frazier, and I am the director of the Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. And my question is this. The next president will have to make some very, very tough choices in order to solve the nation's spending and debt crisis. Would you be willing to say that our national security is so paramount